This is Holy Faith Media.
Joe Pasillo. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach. And we have a great show for you tonight, all right? Because we're going to talk about narratives, okay? We're going to start with that. It's going to be the main thrust of the initial segment in this conversation. Narratives, things we've been force-fed for decades. Things like, it's the economy, stupid, all right? And we're going to break it down a little bit because that's what we do at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. But first, we want to thank you all for being here. Please, wherever you are watching us, support us by giving us a click, a like, a share, friendship, hit the little bell, whatever the case might be. But this is a conversation that you're definitely going to want to hear, perhaps participate in. The chat room is open, okay? We actually have the first comment. Sally from Australia, so you know we're worldwide now, baby. Hey, Sally, how you doing? We got Colin and Barbara coming in, and everybody's going to be coming in as we go along. This is a great conversation, so we're going to break down a few of these things. Remember, Joe and I now, by the grace of Almighty God, we are on the Veritas Catholic Network where we do an interview show on AM radio. Again, thanks to your prayers and your support, we're able to do that. So we have a great interview show Sunday afternoons at 5 o'clock p.m. If you're not in the Connecticut, Northern Long Island, and Westchester area, you could download the app, Veritas Catholic Network, and there's a link to the podcast where you could hear all of Joe and our interviews. We recently did an interview with Bill Donahue 2 weeks ago, Jesse Romero last week, Teresa Tomeo today. All great interviews that we're sure all of you are going to love. And always remember to follow us on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing, where we have a 3-hour Monday afternoon political and cultural commentary similar to what we're doing here. We recommend to everyone to take advantage of the 30-day free trial subscription, for which Joe and I gain nothing, zero, okay? But we love Mike Church down at the Crusade channel. We love what he does. We have a platform there, and he has a great channel. So now, having said all that promo stuff, let's get into the conversation. But just to give you an idea, we're going to talk about cultural populism, and we think that's very important. We got a lot of anti-Christianity going on, Joe Resinello.
Sad but true.
Sad but true. I mean, it's the way it is. This is not woe to us, you're picking on us Christians. We're going to give you some real life stories and what people are saying, both as far as the cops are concerned and, unfortunately, as far as the military are concerned. We're also going to talk about something called unintended consequences, or the law of unintended consequences, so that the COVID let's say lockdown Gestapo, all right, thought that they were going to achieve some goals that they probably did. Well, the one unintended consequence is that women in particular are really happy staying home. And we're going to break that down for you too. And of course, the never-ending usurpation of parental rights in America. It's got to come to, all of this has to come to an end. But parental rights need to be preserved and protected by the United States government. Okay, by all levels of government. So we're going to get into that all, but we're going to start with cultural populism.
As Joe said, and this is basically the theme of the show, Emily Jasinski, she's great. She's in the she writes for the Federalist. She wrote an article entitled "The Cultural Populist Agenda." We want to just talk a few highlights from that article. I think there's so much in it. It's very rich. Let me just read you one sentence, and I have a couple comments I want to just break down from it. It says, the cancel culture and identity politics are used by elites to disempower the working class. People living paycheck to paycheck are rendered less able to speak freely over the amplified voices of the elites to help their children and communities. I'm going to give you a concrete example of this. Now, obviously, the left constantly panders to the working class, and they say, we're for you. I'm going to give you an absolute an example of how that's not true. A gentleman that I know from church, his name is John Paul. He's a little simple, to be honest with you. He worked at Today's Man. I think he made something like $12 an hour. He works, though. You know, he's limited, but he's a person that does work. He worked before Trump came in over the whole Obama administration, and they only gave him 29 hours a week because they didn't want to give him benefits. The minute that Donald Trump became the president, he got benefits and got 40 hours a week. The minute Donald Trump left office, he was just laid off. And that's why I bring this up. That's the very person they say that they're for, right?
Right.
He's a simple person.
Right.
He's a low-income person. He makes $12 an hour.
Right.
Rendered powerless. He's out of a job.
Right.
That, to me, speaks volumes. Yet that connection isn't being made by voters nor by the media. And frankly, I don't understand the mentality of a lot of Democrats who continue to speak to that narrative because it's simply not true.
Well, it's not true. Okay, let's break this down a little bit because Emily Jashinsky, she's getting into some of the reasons or some of the people, let's say for argument's sake, that were disaffected. All right, by, let's say for argument's sake, or voted against the traditional liberal Democrat, people who you would think would be liberal Democrats and who perhaps in the past were, but now really are questioning that. Again, part of the story that we're telling you tonight. It's not only about the economy. Now, in Joe's example, again, this is supposed to be the party of the working man. That's what we've been told our whole lives. But let's take it to a different level, okay? What we're not talking, Jashinsky says, we're not talking about bitter clingers. Remember Obama said we cling to our God and guns. He said we're not talking about bitter clingers who find themselves alienated by elites. Remember, it's always the elites who tell us and everybody else what is going through our minds. Of course, we don't have our own minds. We need the elites to tell us what's going through our minds. But Jashinsky makes a good point. She said, it's the Clinton voting parents of track runners who are losing scholarships to biological men. That has nothing to do with the economy, but that makes mothers a little bit worried, but are terrified to say anything critical. It's the single millennial living alone in a city, unable to make it through a Netflix film, let alone a book. It's the people addicted to pornography, parents who catch their kids watching videos. We won't use the title, but it's a Cardi B video, former stripper who performed a striptease at the Grammy Awards, okay? Her song, again, I won't give you know the song we're talking about. These people are tired of this. And can I give you an historical context? I've always thought this, by the way. Papa Bush, George H.W. Bush, trounced Michael Dukakis in 1988. Trounced him. It was one of the biggest landslides, if not the biggest landslide in American electoral college history, okay? Not everything about that had to do with the economy because what Michael Dukakis represented, he was an ACLU lawyer, he was from Massachusetts. People were turned off by him, okay? But now here's the reason why I say it's not just about the economy. And people actually, and I want your comments on this, Joe. I'll be as short-winded as I can. Al Gore should have trounced George W. Bush in 2000. You're coming off a good economy. It was before the market crashed. The election was before the market crashed in 2000. Al Gore did not win Louisiana. Now, Al Gore and Bill Clinton are both from the South. Al Gore did not win Louisiana, his home state of Tennessee, and Clinton's home state of Arkansas. But the economy was doing very well. Okay? The economy was doing very well, and people voted for George Bush. Again, a close election, but it shouldn't have even been close. Fast forward to Obama for a second. Obama, the economy wasn't bad under Obama. I want to disabuse everybody of the notion that the economy was bad. Did he put the brakes on it? Did he try to get us used to 1% economic growth? Yes, but me personally, and I know a lot of people were making as much money before Obama as after. It got better under Trump, but it wasn't a bad economy.
I got crushed.
Okay, all right, he got crushed. But my point is this: Hillary Clinton, given the fact that at least Obama economically wasn't a disaster, she should have trounced Donald Trump. And I want you to give me your opinion for that and get into what she's talking about here, because it ain't just about the economy. Hillary Clinton should have beaten Donald Trump like I don't know what, and yet she lost. She legit lost, and there's a reason why she lost. You could get into it.
Well, I think a little bit it's the swing voters. Some of this stuff isn't palatable for the swing voters. Ultimately, it's the swing voter that determines the president. Sadly, I remember when what's his face, Romney debated Obama, and he was frustrated, and he said basically 47% of the nation is going to vote for you whether you say anything or not. We also saw that with Biden. Biden didn't even campaign,
right? And
people voted. They don't think; they just pull the lever. It's the swing voters. And what Joe, I think, is speaking to is some of this woke activism, which, if you ask me, comes not as much from Biden. I think he's more of a puppet. It's more from the Kamala Harris camp, the California representative that's bringing a lot of that to the White House, as well as Obama himself, who's still in the scene. Don't think he's not. It's the swing voter that this isn't palatable to. You're the average guy that you don't live, sleep, eat, and breathe politics. You just want to live your life. You're a Democrat, or you can go either way. And your kid is now forced to, your daughter's now forced to play soccer with a boy.
Right.
That's going to influence you.
And that's a perfect example. There are a number of reasons, but that's a perfect example.
And I actually think, with this next election, they're going to have an issue. Now, obviously, the tension is going to be around election reform, and that's what the Republicans should focus on, because whether you thought they cheated or not, it's undebatable what they did before the election.
Tell everybody about what's going on, what you told me before the show. Remember something now. You can't do anything as a state. You're not allowed. Like this. The elites. Jashinsky's talking about the elites. The elites are slapping you on the wrist. Joe's going to tell you what a reasonable measure in Georgia to address some of this stuff. A little bit too late for us, however, okay, and what the reaction is. Tell them what you were telling me.
Well, Georgia is trying to basically put some type of reform in terms of the election, in terms of laws. Now, we live under a state, like the United States is individual states. It's up to the states, not the Fed, to design the election rules for that particular state. They're trying to put in some controls. Obviously, don't you think that that's a good idea? Look what happened. Even if you want to dispute whatever opinion you have from January 6th, that should never have happened. That was out of frustration. We don't want that to happen again, no matter who wins. So they tried to put some reforms in. Businesses are now boycotting Georgia because they don't want them to do that. Why? Because they're not interested in an equitable election. They're not.
They're just in power.
And it's about power. And ultimately, here's the deal. If and when they do lose, and they're going to lose, I think regular people who are fed up with some of this stuff, it's not palatable.
Right.
Some of this stuff is simply not palatable.
Get into some of the stuff. Let's right. I mean, she breaks it down, I think, in a really good way, because obviously, she's trying to say the cultural issues. Joe and I say all the time, we are in the breach of the culture war. The cultural issues matter, stupid. That's what I would say to the elites. When they say it's just the economy, it's all about the economy, stupid. No, the cultural issues matter, Mr. or Mrs. Stupid Elite. And the reasons why, Joe's going to tell you, and you're going to agree, because you understand that these are problems. These are problems that we face and we need to do something about.
Some of them, I mean, here's the thing. Sadly, if you ask me, a lot of Americans don't care enough about abortion because it doesn't affect them. Sadly, how people live is how it does it affect me. And some of these issues are going to affect them. For instance, censorship. That's so un-American.
Right.
The press. What's going on with the press? That's not an American idea. They're only putting out one-sided views. They're not pressing Biden. They're simply not, guys. Whether you like them or not, It's just being fair. I'm being objective and fair.
I got to digress for a second. They're not pressing him. Number one, what did he do? One press conference so far?
And he did a horrible job of it.
And look at, now again, one of the
horrible.
things,
I mean, it's just embarrassing.
I'm not going to lie to you, and I'm not going to lie to...
like him or not.
No, right, but I'm not going to lie to you, and I'm not going to lie to all the good people out there who are watching the front line with Joe and Joe. I couldn't, the thought of watching him just made me cringe. And you know what? I didn't watch him. But I know this. It's like underhand pitches.
And he
still mumbles this up. But just to digress, did all you good people out there see what they tried to do to Ted Cruz? Did you see that clip? Okay.
No, I didn't.
See, this is where I like. I got my issues with Ted Cruz, but this is where I like him. He stands up to the microphone, and they were addressing something having to do with the border and the media being allowed to go down there with them. The White House doesn't want the media there. But as soon as he gets up to the microphones, they're in the Senate hallway. So what is a reporter that won't do these things to Joe Biden, by the way, won't press Joe Biden at all? The reporter said to Ted Cruz, could you wear a mask? And Cruz went, we've all been immunized. He goes, but, he says, I'll wear a mask, but when I'm talking to the camera, I'm not wearing a mask. But nonetheless, we've all been immunized. And, that's what vaccinations are for. We've been immunized, all of us, because he had other senators standing behind him. So then what does this snowflake do? Well, could you make us feel better? And Cruz went just like this. Well, I do like the guy, I got to admit. He goes, well, you could step a few feet back if you want to. What's the guy going to say to that? You're uncomfortable? I would have told him kick rocks. There's the door. But at least Cruz, in his kind of politic way, said, well, you could step back a few feet if you want. We need more of that. But go ahead, Joe. But it's the media that Joe was about to talk about. And I wanted to digress, Joe, that because I thought that was kind of a funny story. Because that's one of those F yeah moments where you say like a Republican showing some stones. That's kind of like, yeah, I love it. But that media corruption.
But I mean, ultimately, I think it's the swing voters that are going to turn on them. My bigger concern, though, is the election reform. That is big, people. I'm going to tell you right now. If they institutionalize some of the things that they did in these states before the election, let's not even talk about, like, fake ballots. I'm talking about voter ID. You have to show ID. Mail-in ballots, which, by the way, weren't audited. Checked for signature verification. This is a layup. This is basic controls. Basic. I vote in New Jersey. I'm from New Jersey. When I vote, for years, I go to my old grammar school. I used to go to Union School where I grew up. I'd go, the old lady who would be behind the counter, I'd say, hey, what's going on? Can I have your license? I show her my license. Can you sign right here? And then she looks at my signature, and she has a past ballot that I signed, and she looks at it, and then she gives me a ticket, and then I go and vote.
Right.
What's
the problem?
And I'll be honest with you, I want everyone to vote. I really do.
But they'll try to say what you just described, which is normal and routine and no burden whatsoever. These Hollywood elites are going to try to boycott Georgia, and they're going to call it racist. But if you're a black guy in Georgia, if you go in to buy a bottle of Johnny Walker Black, you know what you got to do? You got to show an ID. And if you're going to tell me that if you're a black guy in Georgia and you go in to vote, you don't have to show an ID. Come on, we know what their scam is all about, and this is where Republicans need to show some backbone. If they don't, I'm sorry.
Well, then we never win. And that's.
Well, I hope they realize that.
No, I mean that's the issue. We'll never. Then basically, you're taking away the voice of the common man. It's now a puppet state. It's a puppet state.
Right.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're no different than Russia with Putin. You think Putin loses? No, because it's made for him to win. Listen, I want everyone to vote, and then if a Democrat wins, good. Listen, you won. It's fair.
Listen,
we'll
if you
get
win
you
fair,
next time.
We'll get you next time. If you win fair and square, that's fine.
That's it. That's the way it is. The people spoke, and that's all we're talking about. That's the key here. And I'll be truthful with you. Outside of that, and that's the primary concern, I think because here's the deal. You have people who are woke who go for it no matter what. Sadly. You have these like folks that live in cities. They're basically, I call them metrosexual. They don't have children. They have a lot of disposable income, and frankly, all this stuff sounds great to them on paper. It works well at their cocktail parties. It's nice conversation. It doesn't affect their life from nothing. But the average person, particularly the swing voter, when it comes to a lot of these cultural issues that have gone way beyond the norm,
Right.
the average kitchen table, it's not palatable. And it's a loser. It's a loser.
Well, that was my point. What I tried to put it into a little bit of an historical context, because we're talking about the elites who tell us, thank you, Colin. Thank you, $20
Thank you, brother.
contribution. Thank you, Colin, so much. You're talking about the elites and what the narrative they always try to spin and how it goes. I use the example of the election of George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush and even Donald Trump to show you, no, it's not. And just to put a finer point on it, Joe, and I want your comments on this, but just think about this. We're not going to get in depth on every one, but these are some of the issues, because this is important, okay? Because these cultural issues are not secondary to the economy. They may be equal in some cases, but they're not secondary, okay? Only with Wall Street guys and bankers and people who have that type of entrenched business interest, for them it's the economy. For the guys like you're talking about, the guy who worked at Today's Man, and a lot of us, okay, for us, the cultural issues just have just as much, if not more. Joe talked about the media corruption. Listen, do you think if the media was fair in this country, there would be a problem with Georgia revamping their election laws? Do you, if the media was fair?
No, and I'll tell you, I don't know what we can do about it. It's sad. It's one of the biggest abuses of the freedoms that we've been given. I mean, a lot of countries don't have freedom of the press. And frankly, it's become so obnoxious. It's almost like absurd.
Right.
It's like it was always skewed. It was always skewed.
William, thank you very
Thank
much.
you, brother.
William just dropped in $10. Thank you, brother, so much.
But it's now, I can't even watch it. I don't watch it, actually.
Well, you
I
can't,
don't.
like you said,
I
you can't.
don't.
Here's another one. You think people don't react to this? Joe just mentioned the untouchable elites. They're going to go along with anything because for them it is about their paycheck, right? Cancel culture. Cancel culture. You think a paycheck to paycheck person, you think that they're going to be happy, whereas Jasinski says they're rendered less able to speak freely over the amplified voices of elites to help their own children and communities? You got paycheck to paycheck people. They can't go to work. And let's say an average Roman Catholic, a faithful Roman Catholic, a blue collar guy or gal goes to work. They can't speak what they truly believe in the workplace. Cancel culture directly affects them. All you have to do is say the wrong thing. Here's what you say that's the wrong thing. Marriage is between one man and one woman. That person gets fired. If a snowflake hears them, that person gets fired.
But I'll be honest with you, Joe, in truthfulness, this is sad, but I think they don't tilt the scales enough. Because that is a small minority of people that I agree with you because I'm in it. But if I'm a political analyst, I'll be honest with you, I don't care about that person. I want the lukewarm Catholic, and they don't care about that.
Well, that's the elite. I know what
but
you're
I'm talking
saying.
about winning. Like purely, forget about what's right or wrong. I'm talking about I'm planning to win this election. What I'm talking about is they've overplayed their hand. Not enough people care about that. And I don't think that's enough to swing it. And frankly, soon, I think the Republicans are going to be for same-sex marriage. Very soon. Because our country's godless. That's a fact. However, you're overplaying your hand when you're telling me that a boy can shower with a girl in a public high school. You're overplaying your hand when the press is censoring people.
That was my larger point, is that that example is a very good example because that's what we broke it down, the Equality Act, okay, with Bill Donahue. That is precisely. Joe Biden says, no, a boy has a transgendered girl, which means a biological male who thinks he's a girl. Joe Biden says, no, that boy has every right to be in that locker room with that girl. That person you're talking about, including in her view and Jasinski's view, a lot of liberals are saying, not my daughter.
And we cover this on the Crusade channel, and we've covered this here. You have liberal cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, cities in Illinois, that basically the parents who are spending incredible amounts of money to send their kids to private schools. We covered this on the Crusade Channel. Harvard Westlake High School in LA costs $40,000 a year to send their kids, and they're indoctrinating them on certain topics that the parents are pushing back. These are liberal cities, and this is what I'm talking about when it comes to overplaying your hand. This is not Montana or North Dakota or Wyoming or Mississippi or Alabama, which can be very conservative, pockets of Montana anyway. But my point is this: it's this type of radical woke culture, and I think that's what Jasinski is basically speaking to, that it's not palatable to people anymore. The average person that has kids, not the city dweller, not the metrosexual, not the single guy or single woman who makes an incredible amount of money that lives in Chicago, Boston, Miami, Seattle, LA, Houston. This is the person who drives a bus. This is the person that works hard, is a nurse, and her husband works for UPS and has 3 kids. That's the majority of America, whether you live in Illinois, Massachusetts, or you live in Texas.
Right.
And here's the deal.
Thank you, Linda. Linda
Thank you
just
very
dropped
much.
in $9.99. Thank you so much, Linda, for your support.
That person is not going to go for this.
Right.
And I'll tell you another thing which I think is interesting. And this is my view, and I think it goes outside of what a lot of people are saying regarding Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. Joe Biden has to be there. Even if he's dead, they have to prop him up.
Like Weekend at Bernie's. It'll be Weekend at Biden's.
Because she can't carry it. He's there for a reason. She can't, and this has nothing to do with her being a woman, her being biracial. It has everything to do with her policies. Joe Biden is the wrapping paper in all this. Their policies are not palatable to the average Democrat. Forget about the Republican. And he needs to be there. And I don't think he's going to bow out, actually.
Biden?
Can't. If he bows out, they get crushed.
Well,
that's just my view.
I think you're right.
I don't think she can't carry it. By the way, he's not making any decisions.
No, he's just the front man.
But he has to be the front man.
Right.
That's my $2 opinion. They need Joe Biden, even if he's unconscious, because her policies, this is California coming at you right now. She comes from California. This is what they're all about. That's what Becerra's all about. That's what she was all about when she was the Attorney General of California. It's not palatable. It's not even palatable in liberal states.
Yeah. So you're at the front line with Joe and Joe, and we're not going to get into it, but just food for thought. You're going to move on to the next one?
Yeah, sure.
Food for thought, because we don't want to spend the whole time on this, but the article itself is in the Federalist, Emily Jasinski. But just to throw the last couple at you, we mentioned media corruption and cancel culture. There's loneliness and isolation. That has to do a lot with, this promotion of opioids and drugs and booze and all that. So that's important to people. Pornography is important to people. Sorry, it's not puritanical to say that is not protected speech under the First Amendment. So she talks about that, and people are fed up with pornography and this pornographic culture. Obviously, big tech. All right, our friend Jonathan Ross at Holy Faith Media has been permanently banned from Facebook. The nicest freaking guy that we ever met, okay, helping our show tremendously, and he's getting perpetually banned on Facebook. We want to thank you, M. Janja, $20 Canadian. Thank you very much. Jonathan got banned on Facebook. Okay, so that whole thing has got to stop. And as we mentioned earlier about the boys in the girls' room, the whole idea of gender extremism, this stuff, as Joe, to use his word, it's not palatable, number one. And number two, that was my point in bringing up prior elections. It ain't just about the economy. People vote on those issues also. Don't let the media fool you. They're not secondary issues. You said people outside of the coastal elites, let's call it flyover country. And we don't say that in a condescending way. Joe and I wish we live in flyover country, okay? Because that's where the good people are. But those people, in other words, we're constantly being told that those issues only matter to them. Well, as Jasinski points out, no, it's Clinton voting parents too. Because this stuff is a bunch of trash that needs to stop. Anyway, you're at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Resinello, way in the breach. So we want to thank you all for joining us. Please, wherever you are listening to us, like, subscribe, share, hit that little bell, do all that fun stuff. And where are we headed next, Joe Resinello?
Well, we're going to California. This is coming from teaparty.com. It's a really good outlet to get some good information. The California state lawmaker is attempting to ban candidates who are members of hate groups, I say that in quotes, or have used quote-unquote hate speech in the past from serving as police officers. There's a bill out there. It's Bill 655, AB 655, and it uses broad terms defining hate that would leave the option open to encompass police officers expressing conservative religious or political views on abortion, marriage, and gender, or with membership in a political party or a church that does. I mean, what is this, America? Is this America? But sadly, this is the narrative. And this is kind of what Jasinski is saying. This is overplaying your hand. Listen, say you're a cop. You're a cop. Pick the state. We'll say California. It's a liberal state, right? You're a cop and you are a Baptist. You're a Southern Baptist. You go to a Baptist church in California and you're black. That person's a hater because he's a Southern Baptist?
Well, if they have the view that the Catholic Church has on abortion, marriage, transgenderism, then yes, that's what they're saying.
That's not palatable, nor is it logical. I try to sometimes, honestly, because I don't consider myself a Republican. To be honest with you, I'm a social conservative. There are many things that's what I am.
That's reality. I mean, you're describing yourself in reality.
And I will on many things have a conversation with somebody, because you could use your prudential judgment on conversations at the border, immigration. We could have a conversation on social conservative things we're not going to have that conversation. But I digress. The point of the matter is I'm stepping back from I don't have a political identity. I really don't. Mm-hmm. I'm a Catholic man. That's what I am.
Right.
And I say that by pulling back an objective person who says to me that man who's black, who's a Protestant, he's a Baptist, and believes that marriage is between a man and a woman, is a racist and can't be a cop. I'll be honest with you, you're nuts. Sorry.
I wonder who's going to be left to be police officers, number one. I'm sorry, the majority of the country is Christian. It's just the way it is. But you know where they're going with this. I wish people would understand. Now, it's obvious, it's a very good thing to talk about, let's say, the details of this particular story. But we know where they're going with this. The left they have an assault on we saw it all summer long. We've been seeing it for years now with this assault on the police, local police departments. If they can't do away with local police departments, because what they want is one broad national police department that they can control from Washington. Local police departments tend to be more independent and tend to be more conservative minded. So we know that. But then with this type of idiotic legislation, what they're trying to say is, okay, but in the meantime, until we get to that point where we have a national police force, which God willing we never do, okay, let's neuter the police as much as we possibly can. Therefore, if you're a cop and you are pro-life, or you think marriage is between one man and one woman, or you think that biological male shouldn't be in a locker room with your daughter, then you are a member of a hate group and you are promoting hate speech and you shouldn't be a cop. If you can't see, if anybody cannot see, number one, the danger in that, and number two, the need to call this, what's this woman's name? It's Ash Kalra. Yeah, Ash Kalra. Assemblyman Ash Kalra, who's a Democrat in California. If you don't have the nerve as a Republican, even though you're so outnumbered in the state assembly in California, to look at this assemblyman and say, listen, absolutely not. And what you're saying is hate speech. And turn the tables on them. That's what we lack the spine to do, by the way, Joe Resinello, is to turn the tables on them. If you allow that boy into my daughter's locker room, that is an act of hatred because you're indifferent to my daughter and her safety and her well-being. Why doesn't anybody do that? I'm just being hypothetical. Why doesn't anybody do that? Why don't we show some stones when it comes to the people? They put their stones on the table all the time. This woman is basically saying if you're a Christian, you need not apply. What was the story you told me about your friend did the documentary about Northern Ireland? Okay,
Yes.
In other words, like Catholics need not apply. In America for a while, it was Irish need not apply. In California, what this guy is saying is Catholics and Christians need not apply to become police officers.
Well, again, this is, if you ask me, it's not palatable to the average person. The problem is the media is pushing it, and the media controls the narrative. Also, the elites who control the power are all for this because they can't say otherwise. If you pick any field, pharmaceutical field, advertising, banking, any field, publishing, if you're a big shot in one of those fields, even if you're in middle management in one of those fields, and you say otherwise publicly, they'll take your job.
Yep.
You can't. And that's why people don't speak out, because the narrative is against them. And what I think is happening, what they don't see, the gap is widening in this country between the power base and the people. Ultimately, that creates a problem. I'm going to tell you that. Because as time goes on, because the pot begins to boil.
That's right.
And that's what's going to happen. And that's why they know that they have to fix the elections. I hate to tell you that.
Well, that's why the Republicans... Go ahead.
They know they're not going to win.
Listen, if we have a fair election, okay, if they do investigate and remedy all the fraud that took place in the last one, okay, pardon my language, the Democrats are going to get their asses handed to them, not just in 2022, but in 2024, because in our view, well, we won't even go there. We don't want to get Jonathan Ross banned any more than he is, and Joe and I want to stay here for as long as you can, but you know where we were going with that. But I have an interesting question for you, because it shows you sometimes how you could call these people out. Muslims, from obviously, are against gay marriage, okay? I don't think they're going to be too happy about transgenderism. Okay, let's just put it like that.
way.
And as far as abortion, my understanding is some sects of Islam are in favor of abortion or a right to choose up to a certain point, but nonetheless, I think primarily they're pro-life. Okay, I believe you could correct me if I'm wrong, guys. But as far as homosexuality and transgenderism, the answer is no. I would ask Ash Kalra, are you going to include Muslims in that?
No.
See,
because she can't.
Well,
He can't.
again, listen, both of us might be right or both of us might be wrong in the current environment. But go ahead.
But you can't.
Why not?
The narrative. And
But then, do you see a weakness for them in that?
well, that's what Patrick Deneen said from Notre Dame. He said basically America is in decline. It is the left's fault, and the left is collapsing under their own hypocrisy. You see, any person, you don't have to have a Harvard degree to see the hypocrisy there. It's utter and absolute hypocrisy. And the narrative, listen, the average person is not for this, and that's why they're going to lose eventually. If they don't structure the elections through the laws, you do it legally. You take away all the controls and create chaos. If they don't do that, they will lose. And when that happens, there's going to be trouble. Because they don't, you notice, and we were talking about this before, the show. Do you notice, are Republicans burning cities? Do you see Joe and I doing anything like that? Not at all.
But we'd be called extremists.
No, but
under this person's legislation, we'd be extremists and
look
terrorists.
What happened, last summer.
Right.
And my point is, when they do lose, they're going to go nuts again. You see, this is out of control.
That's right.
It's out of control.
One of the things that the media tries to do, like almost as like a general principle, not just like say an individual story, but as a general principle, their primary narrative to all of you good people out there is don't believe your lying eyes, because what Joe just said is true. Okay, did you look and see what happened in Portland and Seattle and other cities over the summer? Our answer to that, all of you good people out there, John Boy's in the chat room, Colin, Michael, John, Dennis, Paula, Ann, we all have eyes to see, as our good Lord said. We have eyes to see. We don't have lying eyes. We saw exactly what it was. That was real insurrection. That was real social upheaval, civil unrest, murder, destruction of property to the tune of $2 billion. Okay? We saw it with our own eyes, and the media tries to tell you, don't believe your lying eyes. Those are people who are just fighting for social justice. Yeah, but you burned down a black guy's business. What about that black guy? What about Officer Dorn, a black man who was gunned down? What about him? Shot and killed. What about him? What about justice for him? See, our eyes are not lying to us. We could see. We see. They try to tell you, no, your eyes are lying to you. You need to listen to us because we know better than you. That's what they do. And you know that.
No, but I think, again, ultimately that's going to fail them. Because in 2024, there's going to be no COVID.
Unless they invent a new one.
Well, I'm just saying, there's going to be no COVID. And there's no reason why you have to vote by mail. Because, frankly, it's been proven, again, Jim Baker and Jimmy Carter. Jim Baker's a Republican, Jimmy Carter was a Democrat. They did a study. Bipartisan study said that it is rife for fraud. Don't listen to me. Listen to Jimmy Carter if you're a Democrat. So you can't even find that study, by the way, on Google. I've tried.
Right. Google took it down.
Find it.
That's what we said earlier in the last segment about Emily Jasinski. What are people fed up with? One of the things on that list, big tech. Why can't you find that? I think that that's an important study that was done on a bipartisan level to try to identify areas that need improvement in our electoral process, and they identified mail-in ballots as being the most or the potential for the most corruption and fraud with mail-in ballots. Why did Google take that down? Anybody asking what's his name? Pinchai? Anybody asking? Oh, am I racist for saying his name like that? Maybe, I don't know. Okay, according to everybody out there, I probably would be. How come nobody asked him? Why would you take that down? Because they don't want you to, again, see things like that, because your eyes will just lie to you. You're not us. You're just stupid. All right, we'll interpret that for you. In the meantime, you don't need to see it. And they pick up the bat phone. You know, like what was Commissioner Gordon's phone? Was that the red phone? They pick up the bat phone and call Pinchai over at Google and say, yeah, take that out of your searches. And by the way, take out Frontline with Joe and Joe too, because we don't like them either. All right, bye. Click. You know, that's what they do. That's what people are fed up with. Joe and I are here because of this. We're fighting this culture war because of this, because we're all tired of it. We're tired to death of it. I'm not in a hate group. Okay, and there is no need to have to defend ourselves from people like Ash Kalra. She should be called out and censured for anti-Christian bigotry, and she should have him, his ass kicked right out of the California State Assembly. That's what our thoughts are on that.
Our next story is coming from VDare. This is an interesting tale. We covered this last week. Basically extensively on the Crusade channel. It's basically during military training sessions to address extremism in the ranks, some of the service members have challenged why the Pentagon is not treating the violence during the racial injustice protests over last summer as equally as deadly as the January 6th riots. And that's a valid question. And again, it's the narrative. It's the narrative that's being put out there. Frankly, a lot more people died. And also, in terms of pure dollars and cents, $2 billion worth of damage was done.
You know how much damage was done on January 6th in financial terms?
Between 100 to 1 million, give or take.
Let's highball it. Let's say
1 million.
Let's say 10 million.
I don't even think it was that much.
No, it wasn't. But let's say 10 times what the estimate is. The estimate is, let's say, on the high end, the million. Let's go 10 times that. $2 billion. Now, $1 million worth of damage to federal property when they have to fix it, okay, that you pick up the tab for that. You know who had to pick up the tab for the $2 billion of damage that was done by Antifa and BLM and the rest of that horrid crew? All right, business owners who had their businesses blown out, okay? That's who had to pay for that. Local citizens who had to spend money to rebuild their towns, if they even are rebuilding. That cost average people that $2 billion. $1 million for the federal government, they spend that in a nanosecond, usually on something useless, okay? But that's what you're dealing with. Here's the thing. You're looking at, again, we're talking about elitism here. This blatant elite. Now they're bringing it into the military. So a rank and file corporal, okay, says, well, hold on, guys. Hold on, with all due respect, you know, there is a chain of command, and you don't want to breach the chain of command, all right? So what is the difference between January 6th and what Antifa did in Portland over the summer? Can you explain that? Well, you're not us. We're the army brass. You're a grunt. You'll shut up, and we'll tell you the difference. Because those people are freedom fighters who were in Portland, Seattle, and these other cities. And these people on January 6th are violent, terroristic revolutionaries who want to overthrow the legitimate election of President Joe Biden.
Well,
and they're being told that.
Before we even get into it, John Boy, tell Virgin Most Powerful to put us on. I've been trying to get on that station for a year, maybe 2. And I think we're a perfect fit. I just want to add that. You picked it up too. I've been saying that for a long time. I think we're perfect. Tell Terry and Jesse to put us on. I digress. Anyway, in terms of this, I want to bring up one point. I wonder if even the military brass think this across the board. One thing I saw with this particular regime when they came to power, they actually made the Joint Chiefs of Staff. You could find this on Google. Don't do it now because you're listening to us, but after the show, Google the letter. They made them sign a letter of allegiance to the new regime, Biden, Kamala Harris. They made them. Why? Because they were afraid that the military wasn't going to back them. Why is the military still there? Protecting them from the people. They know. They're afraid. They're afraid. Mm-hmm. There is no question in my mind.
Well, it's the same impulse as trying to tell Christians that they need not apply for let's say, to be a cop in California. It's the same thing. Most people in the military, in the rank and file, are not for any of this nonsense. Now, that's demonstrable. I can't point to the study. One of the reasons, I'll give you an example. Absentee ballots. Why did Al Gore fight so hard in Florida to have the votes recounted in only 2 counties, but did not want to count the absentee ballots because he knew the absentee ballots are coming from the military, and the military is overwhelmingly conservative. Rank and file military men and women look at this woke nonsense and they say, you know what? Not here. Joe said we covered it on the Crusade channel. Rush Limbaugh used to say, God rest his soul, Rush Limbaugh used to say, what's the purpose of the military? To kill people and break things. It's a sad state. I mean, it's the idea. I mean, it is part of human history that all nations need a military. You have to protect yourself because other people, quite frankly, suck. And a lot of times, if you're a good nation, you need to defend yourself against others who would attack you. It's just the way it is, okay? The military is there to kill people and break things. The one thing you don't do social engineering experiments with the military. You know who knows that? The military rank and file. That's who knows. So you get this guy. He is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Ramon Colon Lopez. You want to talk about Orwellian doublespeak?
That's a great name.
Unfortunately, it belongs to a liberal who's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
I love it.
Or else I would say it's an awesome name. But he's saying that this is coming from every echelon that we're talking to. Some people may think that, all right, so the events of January 6th happened. How come you're not looking at the situation that was going on in Seattle prior to that when questions arose of why last summer's racial injustice protests, that's what he called them, racial injustice protests, didn't trigger a similar review of extremist views? Tough conversations have followed to make sure that military members understand the difference between Seattle and Washington, D.C. This is Orwellian doublespeak. This is what he's doing. Don't believe your lying eyes. If you watched what happened over the summer and you watch what happened on January 6th, you cannot compare them. You cannot compare them. January 6th was a skirmish, and unfortunately a girl died. A girl got shot and died, unfortunately.
A veteran.
Okay? But there's so many factors there. That's why the prosecutors are looking for, we covered this a couple weeks ago, the prosecutors are looking for another 60 days because they don't have enough evidence to prove their case. But these military rank and file people, they're saying, well, wait a minute. I see this over here. This looks really like a skirmish. That looks like an insurrection over there in Seattle, Portland, and other places. And basically, Mr. Lopez, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, is telling him, don't believe your lying eyes. That's what he's saying.
That's only going to go so far. Truthfully, I think we're in trouble because of that. You cannot have basically, after a while, it's the regular man makes the wheel turn. That's in any country. At the end of the day, you have to basically appease the regular man, whether you like it or not. And frankly, after a while, I think it's the pot's going to boil.
Well, I think it has no choice.
Boy, it's happened historically.
And it goes back to our original conversation. It's not just about money. People are tired of it. Joe, if I keep going like this to you, now I'm not punching you in the face, but if I keep going like this, you're going to go, Joe, stop. And I keep going like this, you go, Joe, stop. And now I'm only poking you. Eventually, you're going to give me a backhand. Eventually, you're going to say, Joe, I told you to stop 5 times. That's what they're doing to people. They poke, Joe. They poke. And if you keep poking and you let them, eventually they start to hit you. Eventually, they start to punch you. Now, we're not advocating violence, nor will we ever, okay? But I'm just using that as an analogy. They love rubbing people. They love trying to provoke a reaction. Why do you think they seized? January 6th wasn't the reaction they wanted. They wanted a lot worse. They took what they could get, and they got their media comrades to go and run with it, okay, to make it seem. I met somebody who is in law enforcement in D.C. and called it an insurrection. But I was at a friend's house, so I had to keep my mouth shut. I was going to say, that was no insurrection. What are you, drinking the Kool-Aid? But he was a nice guy, and I didn't want to argue with him. You know what I mean? It was a social function, and I didn't want to get into it. Okay, they call it insurrection. It's not insurrection. Can I address something in the chat room? Sure. Michael John Dennis is with us. Okay, Michael, what's happening, brother? Michael, we covered Milo a couple weeks ago. Now, Michael's gay. Okay, Michael's a traditional Catholic and he's a patriot. Okay, and I just want to address this because Michael knows, but I'd like for all of you to know. Okay, it's very simple. Okay, Joe and I, we're faithful Catholics, as Michael is. Okay, and I understand we all have our thing. Okay, we all have our sins. Okay, bottom line is this. So because some people might be surprised to see Michael's comment where he says he's a patriot, he's a faithful Catholic, and he's gay. Michael, we love you, and my larger point is we are only fighting against an agenda. As you have commented, you are too, because he's against all this nonsense too.
Good for him.
He's against it. Well, Milo wasn't. Why do you think Milo was hated by the left? Because Milo turned around as a practicing gay man. Milo gave a lecture where he turned around and said, the Catholic Church is right about everything. He did an interview with Michael Voris. He says, I know I'm not living up to the standards of the church. That was a couple years ago, and now he came out and he says he's ex-gay, which is really making left-wing heads explode, okay? But I just wanted to address that because it's always important to note. We are fighting against agendas is what we're fighting against. But we love all people, and we're not just saying that because we pray for all people every day. So were we going on to the next story?
Yeah.
So we're at the front line with Joe Pasillo and Joe Rossinello way in the breach. And what do we have? One more left?
2.
All right, so we got 2 more stories. I like this. I really like this next one. So they're going after cops and they're going after the military. We can't let them do it.
Susan Sammons in Crisis Magazine had this to say. It's a very interesting perspective. She said, early March saw a flurry of tweets from women bemoaning the looming return of life to its pre-pandemic whirlwind, blazers and heels and carpooling and rushed meals, less time at home and much more time on the run. What professional women found in 2020 was that allocating their time and budget to a greater extent at home is more effective. They're happier, basically. That's at the gist of the argument. And I have a couple thoughts on this, and I think it's accurate. I mean, I have a job where I could work from home, and so does my wife. And I think our lives, I hate even to say this, it's almost sinful to say it, but our life improved. Some other people's lives didn't, however. And I think we have to talk about...
Tom Gugliotta, thanks, brother. $20 Canadian in the chat room. Tom Gugliotta, thanks, brother.
But I think you have to talk about the underlying factors here. Why do women work? I'll use my wife's and our daycare. Not only did she lose her business, she's leaving New Jersey. She can't afford to be here anymore.
Who are we talking about?
Maria.
I didn't know she closed down.
My point is, people don't work because they want to. They have to. Mm-hmm. Why is that? Well, people need benefits. A single man who has a job in America, say you're an electrician, you make a good living. How are you going to have benefits? It costs too much money. I'll tell you what my benefits cost. My benefits cost $800 a month for my family. I have benefits. I still have a deductible, and I still get medical bills, residual medical bills. How does an average family afford that? Also, employment at will. Why do women have to work? There was a time when you were in America and you worked for a company, any company, they were loyal to you. My Uncle Richard worked for Shearing Plow for over 40 years. They were loyal to you. Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Reorgs happen, you're out.
Right.
You did your job, you're out. Or they insource you. They move your job to Salt Lake City. The point of the matter is this. Of course they enjoy it because it's the right thing to do. It's the best thing to do. The structure of the American economy, sadly, in many cases, doesn't permit it. Because again, a family, take a man who's a plumber. How is he going to afford having to pay for his insurance if his wife doesn't work? Many times those women have to take a job simply for benefits. That's to live.
Right.
Now again, say you're a professional and you get fired. Unemployment doesn't cover it. I got news for you. You have 3 kids. I was laid off during the banking crisis 2 times because I was in banking. Mortgages went out. I wasn't married at the time. I owned my apartment outright, and I didn't have a car payment. So I wasn't affected. I know many people that lost their houses. So the point is this. Is this woman right? Absolutely. Women should be home. They should. The house benefits. Everyone benefits. Life isn't as hectic. But things have to take place for that to happen.
Can I get into what needs to take place?
Sure.
But one thing that has to take place is conservatives need to be told you can no longer bend the knee to the free market. You can no longer bend the knee for cheap labor. Republicans and conservatives have to do something, anything, to secure that border and to prevent American corporations from exploiting the cheap labor coming across that border at the expense of American workers' wages that would enable the man to go out and earn that money to provide for his family and the wife and mom stay home. Okay? Let's promote and incentivize through the law and through our taxes in a meaningful way marriage and children. So that what happens is that women, rather than going out into the workforce, look, some women are feminists. They're going to go out and hear me roar, and they want to go out there and they want to go make $1 million and kill their babies and bang everything in sight. Can't do anything about that. Many women, and this is what I think that Susan Salmons is getting to, many women don't want that. Even if they're in the workforce, they don't want that. Joe's wife's in the workforce. My wife's in the workforce. They don't like that. They're not interested in that. Now, some of those women are. But if you gave my wife a choice, in other words, everybody knows that we're in the process of trying to adopt children. Under COVID, that's been a real nightmare, okay? But nonetheless, when we do get kids, okay, my wife would very much like to just be home. She would love to just be home, okay? My mom growing up, I'll give you an example. Your mom worked as a legal secretary, right? Yeah. My mom worked after we grew up. So we were already grown. After we grew up. Okay, my mom worked for Votech schools, okay? So in other words, my mom went out and got some work and let's say made extra money to help pay the bills and raise our standard of living, but my mom raised us, okay? That's the larger point. These women, what did Susan Salmons say is their most valuable commodity here? Their time. They can allocate their time better and do their job from home and take care of their kids, and they're finding that even if they didn't have the job, they have now control back over their lives.
Joe, but the difference was your father was in a union and couldn't get fired.
Well, he did always say job security was a big thing.
But my point is, that's you see, now the employment it's different. There's no loyalty to people. You see, the problem is a lot of these women, it's a layup. Of course they want to live. Listen, your life is easier. I got 8 hours a week back just as a man. But I could work from home. Not everyone can. And that's why a lot of people got crushed. This article isn't covering the people who lost their jobs. This article isn't covering the people who lost their houses because they need that money. A lot of women work because they have to work.
That was my larger point.
No,
that was my larger point.
My point is, what has to, for this to happen, and it should happen, a lot of things, for instance, insurance. If the Republicans don't create a system. Insurance has turned into, I'm going to tell you right now, and I'm fortunate. I told you how much my insurance costs. It costs $800 a month. Okay, I have 4 kids. I can't live without insurance.
Right.
I can't. I'll be bankrupt. If something happens to one of my kids, they get stitches. That's a bill. That's $17,000. One bill. I can't not have insurance. Insurance is turned into something, it's a luxury for people who have quote unquote good jobs. That's not right. And I got news for you, all you Republicans out there who hear my voice. If you don't fix that, we're going to have socialized medicine. They're going to win, because I'm going to tell you this. You want to talk about the cancel culture pushing people over the edge? That'll push people over the edge.
Right.
That'll push Republicans over the edge.
That's right.
When you're looking at your kid who has an appendicitis and you have to take him to the emergency room and you get a bill for $37,000, you're finished.
Right.
You're an average person. And most times, like I said, there are men who make a good living. They don't have benefits. Your wife has to work. And I'll even challenge on anyone who calls me out on it. If your wife doesn't work in that situation, you're not a good mother, because you have to take care of your family and they need benefits. Your children need benefits. Sorry. People have to do this to live, not to have a Cadillac, to live. And it's the way the economy is structured now. And that has to change.
I was going to say, well, that has to change, and Republicans have to do something about it. Look, Joe made a good point. I don't mind saying, I just paid my insurance premium. By the way, I only pay for myself, for health, dental, and vision, $680 a month, because my boss puts in $0, okay? And my wife gets benefits through her job, and I can't be on her benefits, and she can't be on mine because they would be unaffordable.
That's my
point. The benefits
point.
would be unaffordable.
That's exactly my point.
But my point is this, and you're right about the unions, by the way. I'm not dismissing that.
Or
okay?
you're a cop, you're a teacher. You can't get fired.
Right, you can't get fired. But my point is this, though. But the companies were still able and were forced to pay those wages, okay? But one of the reasons why is because you did have a robust family life in America. You had less, my larger point in bringing it up was that you had less people in the workforce. You didn't have all these people flooding across the border, and corporations were forced to compete for labor. And just like anything else, when they're not forced to compete for labor, when they can get anybody to do the job, they can pay that person any amount of money, and that person will do it for the reasons that Joe's describing. They got to put food on the table. If you take people out of the workforce and you close the borders and you do what Trump did and you do away with the workers' visas and things like that and keep those jobs for Americans, then American corporations have to compete for labor, in which case wages go up. And the woman who we're talking about in this article, that hypothetical woman, can then stay home,
and that would be
with
great.
Her children.
And that would be great. You take European companies, corporations, they have workers' councils. You can't just fire people. But what does that entail? That slows the economy down. And that's talking to what Joe says. Why don't American corporations go for that? I'll tell you why. Because it slows the economy down. American corporations are employment at will, which means I can fire you for anything. I could fire you even if you're doing a good job and there's a reorg. How do you build a life in America with that? How do you have a family? How? Tell me, honestly, I'm open for the conversation. How do you build a life? Because unemployment doesn't cover it when you have to pay a COBRA plan for a family. You can't. That's what every person in America is faced with right now. I'm sounding like Joe Biden, actually.
Well, nobody ever said that when the left identifies a problem, that there's not a problem. What we're opposed to is their solutions. Now, many times they make up problems. Systemic racism comes to mind, because if anybody's systemically racist, it's them, okay? But sometimes there are real problems. What we're talking about are real issues. We're talking about health insurance is one of the biggest issues.
And that's not a privilege.
In this country. It's not, okay? And Joe mentioned COBRA. That's one of the reasons why I'm paying, because I lost hours, obviously, last year. I came down below the requisite number of hours, so I am forced into COBRA. This year I'll be going back on my other plan. But that was still $430 a month for just me. Okay.
Oh, Joe, for COBRA for a family?
Oh, no. Family for COBRA is $1,000. For me, it's $683. Okay. But my point is that, I guess my larger point is that these are things that need to be addressed.
Have to.
But I was saying, the Democrats sometimes hit the nail on the head. Okay, Bernie Sanders is not always wrong. What he is always wrong about is his policy prescription for it. What we need, and this is going to be a problem for conservatives, okay, is big pharma is going to have to be challenged, okay, and the racket they got going on. The insurance companies have to be challenged. And why am I paying $8,400 a year when I could calculate right now off the top of my head, at most, I need about $1,000 worth of services? Checkup, blood test, go to the heart doctor. I'm 53 years old. Okay, I'm a little overweight. So all these different things, right? I could calculate probably $1,000 is all I have to spend. Why am I forced, and I have to be forced, okay, to pay $8,400 a year, which is what I'm paying when I'm paying Cobra? That's ridiculous. And like you said, for a family,
can't do it.
Families in Cobra, you can't do it.
And not everyone makes hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
No.
See, that's another thing. You see, like, I'll be honest with you. Look at the median income across the nation in cities. All these bills, do the math. It doesn't work out. I could remember, I'll tell you another personal story. I could remember a guy, he was an officer of Morgan Stanley, a CPA and an MBA. His wife didn't work. He was my friend. He got sacked. He had 3 kids. He was screwed. He's of the 2% in this country. Who has an MBA and a CPA from Fordham? He could not make his bills. If he can, and that was in 2008. If he can't make his bills, the average guy who works at UPS is going to have his wife stay at home. He's crushed. He's crushed. It's over. And it's not just him. He's got 3 kids. And you don't just get a job. You see, America's structure is screwed up. And that's why Bernie Sanders got traction. I'm telling you this right now. There's no stability. Years ago, people had neighborhoods. They lived there forever. They were dug in. Nowadays, if you work for a corporation, you get near-sourced. You got to move. You uproot your kids from high school, from grammar school. Is that right? No. But that's reality. It's reality. This is real. And here's the thing. That's why they've gotten traction. The Republicans better fix that.
They better.
Or they're going to lose.
We need, as far as, and then we'll move on, we need a shift, a paradigm shift in this country when it comes to healthcare. We need some real free market solutions. We have to stop with the crony capitalism when it comes to pharmaceutical companies and health insurance companies. But can I just end the last conversation about mothers with just this one point from Susan Salmons? I think it kind of encapsulates what we're saying, because obviously I know what you're saying, okay? We have to deal with reality. Families have to deal with reality. But this is it. But what Susan is saying in this article is just what she has found is anecdotal evidence. Here's what she said, and then we'll move on. The response to COVID-19 forced working women at home into difficult changes, which was what Joe was speaking to. These were difficult changes, okay? But as they made these forced adjustments, something unexpected happened. They found the slower pace of life helped them connect with their families more deeply and more frequently. And the real surprise was how happy this made them in spite the upheaval in the outside world. So we're going to end this by saying we need a real movement in this country to do something to get back. I told you, me and my friend went out to breakfast a couple years, or about a year and a half ago, and he was saying, why were our parents able to do it? I said, quite frankly, because we didn't have open borders and women were not in the workforce. So men went out and earned a living, and they were able to earn enough money and have those benefits to be able to provide for the whole. My father did.
I get it.
Before my mother was in the union with Essex County, my father worked for Consolidated Freightways. He had benefits that covered the whole. He had to chip in for them.
I get it.
But he had to pay for it. But the wages were there, okay? And not just in union jobs. The wages were there, and we need to maybe find some solutions, Republicans, to get back to that.
And here's the thing. Joe and I, again, as you could tell, like we're real in the sense that we are living in the real world. Like ideas only go so far. until you have to like in terms of, and that goes on both sides of the aisle. You know, healthcare and wages and moms at home are good. That's a good thing. But I'll be honest with you, this is part of the rot that is America right now.
That's a cultural problem too.
Big.
I don't think it's as much a political problem as that's a cultural problem because a lot of women buy into feminism and everything else, and I have to go out and do this. I have to go out. Like Joe said, most women in America, if the man, we'll leave it here, if the man was able to go out and earn enough money to raise that family and provide with that family, most women in America, I would say, except for radical feminists, most women would say, you know what, Joe, thank you. Go out and earn the money. I know my wife would say the same thing and say, I'll stay home with the kids.
Absolutely.
As long as, again, we have to live in the real world. If I could go out and pay the bills and provide for the family with health insurance and everything else, savings, college, all that, then guess what? Yeah, women want to stay home and take care of the kids. Anyway, you're at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Resinello, way in the breach, and a whole bunch of people out there. Colin Daniels just joining us. And a whole not in vogue KC Royals fan. KC Royals fan said, "Wear your scapular." KC, got it right here. All right, so Joe, we have one more story, and we're talking about moms, dads, right? We're talking about elites. We started the conversation talking about elites and things that people have a problem with. Okay, so this final story, again, this is what we're going through in this culture war. I'm handing it over.
Charlie Butts of One News Now had this to say. Illinois has passed a law requiring that parents of minor girls seeking an abortion must be notified before the girl can terminate the preborn. I want to stress one thing. This is Illinois. This goes to what Joe was saying in the very beginning of the show. It's gone too far. This is not a conservative state. However, this hasn't been put into place for 15 years. Okay? Mm-hmm. And what's the driving factor behind this? A minor girl, isn't equipped to make such a decision. It's like a girl who wants to transition into the body of, say, a boy. You're young. You don't know that this is for life. It's like putting a tattoo on your forehead.
Yeah, it'll be there when you're
forever.
80. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And an abortion, if you're an adult, I still don't agree with it, but there are consequences. Just like in anything in life, there are consequences. And what they're basically saying is a young girl is not equipped to make that decision. But I want to just point that out. It's Illinois that's saying it. Mm-hmm. And this goes along with what we were saying at the beginning of the show. They're overplaying their hand. That a parent has no say in their 15-year-old girl.
Well, tell the people why this is a loser. Because Charlie Butts, obviously, he backs this up with some numbers. Why is this a loser for them, Joe?
Well, ultimately, you look at some surveys that are conducted. 72% of voters oppose overturning the law.
Right.
And that includes 58% who consider themselves to be pro-abortion.
Now, stop there, because pro-abortion people, I always say, Joe and I don't consider everybody who calls himself pro-choice to be evil. I consider Planned Parenthood to be evil. I consider Joe Biden to be a person who has embraced evil. A lot of people, for a variety of reasons, I think it's our job, is to debunk a lot of the arguments that they've heard and bought into by offering a counter argument. I do believe that those people would come over to the pro-life side if we're allowed by social media and the regular media to actually address some of those things, okay? But here's one thing those pro-choice people say, 58% of the time. Well, you know what? But a minor girl needs to let her parents know. They know that much, don't they? Because that's just common sense. A 14-year-old girl could go in for an abortion and the mother and father aren't notified? I wouldn't slap the crap out of the 14-year-old girl when I found out about it. I would go down to the Planned Parenthood and heaven help those people who gave my daughter an abortion without letting me know about it, regardless of what the law said. Heaven help those people. That's about 58% of those people said absolutely not.
Well, it's similar to like with abortion in the third trimester. Over 85% of Americans are against it. It's a loser. You see, this is a loser. And this is where they overplay their hand. Parents, listen, once you're 18 and you're out of the house, if you want to destroy your life, listen, I'll weep for you because you're my kid. But you're now legal to do it. My job is to teach you what's right. Now, I hope you listen, Because again, you do have free will. Not everyone listens, people,
Right.
sadly. But ultimately, while you're under my roof as a father and a mother, you should have a say. You cannot give in America, at least in New Jersey, an aspirin to a kid in a public school without getting permission. When my kids go to school and they want to take cough medicine, this is pre-COVID, mind you, I would have to send a letter. And you're going to tell me that this kid could have an abortion without me knowing? That's insane.
Right.
And here's the interesting thing. This is Illinois that says, no. We talked about LA in schools that are against what's being taught to their kids. You're overplaying your hand. Be concerned, Democrats, about your swing voters, because that's who's going to either put you in office or take you out. Little whisper in the ear, this is a loser.
Well, again, they know. I don't know why. I still haven't figured it out. I consider myself a pretty smart guy. I consider Joe a pretty smart guy. I haven't figured out why they get on board with loser issues. It seems to work for them. But you want to know the main reason it works for them? Take Obamacare. 70% of the American people were against Obamacare. They went ahead and they rammed it through anyway. Did not care. They went ahead and they rammed it through. Republicans swept in. The Tea Party swept in 2010. All right, and that whole crew. Okay. Why were the Democrats were able to get away with this? And why is Obamacare still the law? Because they're better at politics than the Republicans. And they'll get this done in Illinois. If you give them enough time, they'll get this done. Because Republicans suck at politics because they have no heart.
They don't have the heart.
They don't have spine. They don't have any courage. And I dare say many times they have no conviction.
But they don't have the media, too. You see, the media is the propaganda machine, but they don't have the heart. That I can guarantee. They simply don't know when. Actually, they know when to stop. The Democrats don't. Tim Gordon said this, and he's 100% right when he came on our show. He said, they're going to conquer every inch.
Yep.
He's right.
Yep.
They're out to conquer every inch, and the Republicans aren't. It's like in sports, when you played sports. When you were a kid, there were kids that were good. They didn't have heart. What do I mean by that? It's a killer instinct. When you play sports, there's a competitive edge. Michael Jordan had a competitive edge. Michael Jordan wanted to win. You see, there were other people like Derek Coleman who played on the Nets. I bring him up because he was the local team. Derek Coleman had immense talent. Any given night, Derek Coleman would put in 30 points and have 15 rebounds when he wanted to play. But a lot of times he didn't. Michael Jordan wanted to play every night, and Michael Jordan wanted to win. That's what the Democrats are, and that's what the Republicans are. They're Derek Coleman. They don't have the competitive edge, the willingness to win. And you know something? Again, I played sports. You can't teach that.
Yeah, that's true.
You can't teach it.
That's true.
There are kids who have that naturally. They're competitive. And then there are kids that are easygoing. They just don't have that. They may even have the talent, but they don't have the heart. The heart's what gets you over the line. The Republicans don't have it.
Well, the Republicans better get it. They better talk about paradigm shifts. They better get it. Mitt Romney better get it, and the rest of Susan Collins. We talked about Emily Jasinski, who I think is infinitely smarter than Mitt Romney and Susan Collins and the rest of the wishy-washy Republicans. These cultural issues matter. Voting against the Equality Act matters. Holding the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Army brass to account. No, there is those. You're not going to impose. You're not going to describe certain members of the military as haters or hate speech or hate groups or terrorists or extremists simply because they're Christian or Catholic. And the people in California need to step up, and they need to tell that Ash Garrow, whatever his name is, no, you're not going to tell cops if you're Christian you need not apply. This is where they have to step up. You have to step up in this culture war. And Republicans better get it through their head, Joe. They may very well do something about these elections. They may very well sweep in 2020. Are you going to give us more of the same, Utah? Are you going to vote for Mitt Romney? Are you? Because if you are, then don't do us any favors. I'd rather get beaten by the left, but fight, than lose to the left because of Republicans that cave in all the time. I really would. And that's the truth.
No, I get it. I mean, it's heart-wrenching, actually. But you know something? Enjoy your hour. That's what I would say.
Who has his day?
God has his day. This will collapse. It's sad. I say this all the time. It's like watching a drug addict. It's like watching a drug addict destroy themselves. We're destroying ourselves. Look at California. You're going to tell me, look at the fruit that your leadership has bore in California. People are fleeing California, and I don't blame them.
They've lost house seats.
I don't blame them. How could you raise a family in such a place?
I was having a conversation the other day with somebody. The idiots, I'm sorry, Lord forgive me. The idiots that are leaving California because they don't like what California has become, because of the people that they themselves voted for, are now going to Arizona, Texas, and Florida to go bring that same politics down there. You just escaped it. That would, to me, would be like second-generation Cubans whose grandfathers and fathers have told them all about, because they knew it firsthand, all about the Castro regime, all about the totalitarian regime in Cuba, and their fathers told them about it, and their escape, and their moms told them about it, and how their grandfathers were shot by Che Guevara and Castro, and then the second generation comes here, and they vote for the same type of people that put Castro in power. Why would you do that?
I don't know.
I don't know.
But that just, it's the weight of it. It can't sustain itself, is my point. Those choices have consequences. We're seeing it. California is a wasteland. So is Washington in the big cities, Seattle. Go to Oregon, look at Portland. It's a wasteland. It doesn't work. You know a tree by the fruit it bears. Forget about your political hat. It doesn't work, guys. Sorry, your ideas are bad. And what's going to happen is, if this continues, these ideas are bad. They're bad. America will fall as a result of it. It will fall.
So let's right the ship.
And here's the thing. If it doesn't fall, when it falls, the whole world will be affected. The whole world will be affected. That's reality.
Yep.
And sadly, I watch it. I don't have all the answers. Listen, it's common sense. Our show is about common sense. We're watching it happen. Look at the fruit it bears. Forget about your political hat, and then make your choice.
Yep, there you go. Ed W., thank you, brother. California is ruining North Texas as fast as they can, and Ed threw $9.99 into the box. Thank you very much,
Thank
Ed.
you, brother.
God bless you. I want to end with this, and then we're going to leave. And we love you all. I want to thank you for joining us at the front line with Joe and Joe. Charlie Butts, if you think passing laws are not at least some part of the solution, and we do need effective laws, okay? The Parental Notification Act saves an estimated 1,000 babies a year, catch this, and is responsible for a 57% drop in teenage abortions. Not only that, it also protects the young girls from sexual exploitation from older men, simply because Planned Parenthood has to pick up the phone and call little Jane Smith's mom and dad and say, your daughter's here to have an abortion. Because a lot of women, unfortunately, young girls are exploited by older men. And if the parents don't need to be notified, you know what can happen? That older man can then manipulate that girl and take them down to Planned Parenthood, have an abortion, and continue to control and manipulate that girl. So it's the Notification Act is pro-woman. So we're going to leave it there, and saves 1,000 babies a year. So we're going to leave it there. We want to thank you for joining us at the front line with Joe and Joe. Thank you for all of you who contributed financially. We would ask you to contribute with your prayers for the continued success of the front line with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel, on Facebook and YouTube. We're on Veritas Catholic Network with our interview show, and it's all because we are in Our Lady's hands and your prayers for us, and we're keeping it moving. We're keeping to grow the show, having the hard-hitting conversations, talking about things not everybody wants to talk about, and doing it as best we could. Kitchen table politics, kitchen table cultural commentary. That's what we're doing here. So thanks again for joining us. Like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, for the next time, from Joe and I, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation, it's going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon.